for human beings and how we had it all wrong or got it all wrong.
Perfect.
All right.
We can start talking about that now.
Yeah. Look, Dr. Nelson, good morning. He's coming on. He's still getting on there. He's not quite with it yet.
Muted.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
I guess my microphone was muted. Sorry.
We got you here. Morning, Bill. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. We got Dr. Nelson Alia and Bill Schindler is going to talk about his restaurant, his books, his teachings, and why we've got it all wrong in the modern pyramid and way we're eating and living. Bill, welcome. So tell us a little bit about what got you into this restaurant anthropologic teachings and ancient way of living.
My background is archaeology and anthropology. I've been an archaeologist and teaching at the college university level for over 20 years. And all of my research was into ancient technologies, prehistoric technologies. And I realized about 15 so years ago that almost every prehistoric technology we ever invented for 3.5 million years worth of time had something to do with food. Almost every single Albert Einstein of all of our ancestors were solely focused on creating tools that had something to do with transforming food. Those tools transformed our diets, and our changing diets supported massive body and brain growth. And we're literally here as functioning humans with these brains and these huge bodies, incredibly inefficient digestive tracts, because of the technologies that changed our diets that did all those things over years. So I have been chasing my own health for many, many years, my entire life, really. And it wasn't until I started really looking from a scientific perspective at our ancestral diets that I started to finally get the answers that transformed my health. It in turn transformed my family's health. And now we have a restaurant and a nonprofit, Modern Stone Age, that we are using it to transform the community's health as well.
So a rock and a stick.
Absolutely.
How are those human tools?
Imagine this is perfect timing because you're in Princeton now. I'm in New Jersey right now. We just had this major snowstorm. It's very humbling to think about what would happen if I stripped you down naked and threw you in the middle of the woods right now. How long would you last? I mean, to be fully honest, we humans have no physical business living in Maryland or in New Jersey or in America or in most parts of the world. I mean, we can't survive without some sort of a technology, right? So we need to change our microenvironment. We need to shield ourselves from all sorts of different elements. We need to do it on a regular basis. It's no surprise that our ancestors first appeared in certain parts of Africa where the climate was such that we could get by and not without those technologies. Now, forget about that though. Even if you were, fully aware of every single edible plant in the world and all the animal behavior patterns of all the animals in your area, all of these things, imagine if I said, feed yourself with no technologies whatsoever. You would be fully restricted to what you have, right? Your nails, your teeth, your muscles, your eyesight, your speed or lack of speed, your inability to fly, your inability to dig in the ground. The reality is we cannot feed ourselves. You don't care if you are Bear Grylls or you just won the last season of Survivor. We cannot feed ourselves without some sort of technology. We can't get nutrients from our environment. And when we do get resources from our environment, we have an incredibly inefficient digestive tract, and we cannot safely and efficiently derive the proper type and amount of nutrition we need to fuel these bodies and brains. Our bodies and brains are built on millions of years of technological innovation that's been helping us do those things with our diets, and we still need to do them today. Fire is a powerful tool. A stone tool makes the difference between you being able to access nutrients from an animal or you watching a rotting carcass sitting on the savannah somewhere. Like starve.
So what was the reason and or benefit of how we evolved from whatever we ate in the Stone Age or pre-Stone Age to what we're eating today over the last how many hundreds of thousands of years?
What do you mean reason?
Well, okay. So meaning that did something happen that that what did we eat before we ate mostly the plants that they're delivering to us in the supermarket?
So first off, before we had any technologies whatsoever, you have to imagine our bodies and brains are about the third the size as they are today. So our nutritional requirements were much, much, much lower. But without any technological input whatsoever, we were eating incredibly hyper seasonal and hyper local plants that were specific to those plants that had a low enough toxin content that we didn't have to do some sort of processing to detoxify them. So again, remember, it's not like we walk into don't walk into the grocery store, go through the produce section with your cart and think you're a modern day hunter gatherer or anything like in the past, because there's no seasons in the grocery store. Those have been hand selected, bred in certain ways. You know, if you're in the wild and like our ancestors were eating wild plants, you could only eat hyper seasonal, hyper local plants, and those plants and plant parts that have a low enough toxin to be able to consume them without really detrimental effects. So very, very limited amounts of fruits and vegetables.
How did they find out if they ate plants, which ones were toxic and not?
It's a great question.
I mean,
there are similarities between certain plant families that are very evident. So once they found some that worked, plants that looked very similar, acted very similar, typically had very similar toxin or high or low toxin contents. But the reality is, and this is very important, as we know, every plant has some level of toxin in it, period. The part of a plant, two parts of the plants typically have low or no toxins in them, and that's the flowers and ripe fruits, because their role is to attract. Every other part of the plant is just trying to keep things away from it. So typically they would be eating ripe fruits or already naturally fermenting fruits. What's incredibly important for us to understand with that is, even in that case, it's nothing like what we see in the grocery store, right? The grocery store, we have bred fruit to be bigger and have more water and have more sugar content and all these other things. A wild fruit is typically a lot smaller, a lot less sweet. The flesh on it, proportion to the seed or the pit or whatever's in it, is much less too. They're not getting these huge, bursts of simple sugars like we do today eating fruits. But the majority of their diet was not plants, although they were eating plants, was insects. Insects provided the most amount of consistent protein and fat. And it's sort of like how we think about animals today in our diets. If we're eating seasonally, there's only certain plants and plant parts you would eat on a seasonal basis in your area, even today. But animals are always there. It's the same sort of thing with bugs. There are some migrating bugs, but for the most part, insects were a very consistent, reliable protein and fat source. And that was the majority of their nutrition came from bugs. So up until about 3.5 million years ago, that was the entirety of their diet. At 3.5 million years ago, we started introducing scavenged meat into our diet. About 1.5 million years later, at about 2 million years, we start hunting, which means we're eating the entire animal. And then from 2 million years ago until about 12 to 15,000 years ago, we were eating a massive amount of nutrition from animals, using the entire animal. Very limited amounts of plants, but we were processing plants. We were getting so good at processing plants to make sure we were detoxifying them and making their nutrients bioavailable. And then everything changes at about 12 to 15,000 years ago when we get the agricultural revolution, and we go from this incredible diet based on a diverse, nutrient-dense resources, and we're focused on 1 or 2 annual grasses everywhere in the world that it hits, and it transforms our diets. But I will say one other thing about the pre-processed diet. We have to make the distinction between processed food and ultra-processed food. What most of us have in the modern industrial food system today is ultra-processed food. We're processing food so people can make money. It can ship around the world, have a huge shelf life. It doesn't get brewed, whatever it is. For other people, for those reasons, at the expense of safety and nutrient density and bioavailability. Don't confuse that with food processing. We have been processing our resources, our food in our diets for 3.5 million years. And it is because of that processing focused on making food safe, nutrient dense, and bioavailable. It is because of those acts that we were able to create a diet that supported this massive body and brain growth. A gorilla, which we are very closely related to, we somewhere between around 10 million years ago, we split with an ancestor. One side ended up being gorillas and one side ended up being us. We're very closely related to them. They don't process their food before they put it in their mouth, and they chew. They are engaged in the act of chewing for 80% of their waking day. The only way they can support their body is because they are physically chewing for 80% of their waking day. And it's a really good comparison to us, where we do most of that processing before it goes into our mouths. And some of us only chew for 15 minutes a day, right? It's a completely different thing.
So where we are today is actually our intelligence to find ways to feed humans, but the way we're marketing and living in a modern world, the ultra processed foods, because is bread inherently poisonous for us as a foodstuff?
No, this is a dangerous question you're asking me now. This is where, when I love having this conversation. So first of all, thank you for the platform, the opportunity to talk about it. As you can tell, I'm incredibly passionate about it. When we talk about food and diet, and we give each other nutritional advice, I don't care if it's coming from a nutritionist or a doctor or your parent or your neighbor, we don't go deep enough. Even if we have incredibly good intentions, we say, okay, don't eat bread, don't eat cheese, don't eat this, do eat this. Well, those food categories are meaningless because the way that they're made, the way that they're processed makes all the difference. Now, is there a nutritional requirement for bread in the human diet? Absolutely not. But we have evidence for at least 8,000 years of bread production in our dietary past. And the bread production and the impact of bread on our diets for thousands of years is nowhere near what the impact of bread in our diets today is. And have we changed a little bit? Well, there's not from a major stance. We still have the same digestive tract, the same body size, the same brain size. But what's changed is the bread, right? The bread has changed the way we're doing it. So from almost 8,000 years ago until the mid 1800s, every single loaf of bread baked anywhere in the world was 100% sourdough. It was by default. Bacteria and yeast occur side by side in nature. They're both attracted to carbohydrates. And if you're rising bread with wild yeast, the bacteria is doing work right alongside of it. And what happens is in the mid 1800s, Louis Pasteur, who I am convinced tanked our food system. We celebrate him in the schools, but he tanked our food system. He was trying to figure out for the beer industry how to separate yeast from bacteria and just keep yeast going in a lab so you could have the yeast fermentation, which creates carbon dioxide when you're making bread, and it creates alcohol when you're making beer. So you just keep this yeast alive and not have the worry about the bacteria. And when he did that, he transformed the bread industry and the alcohol industry as well. A few years later, the Fleischmann brothers figured out how to keep the yeast going in a lab in a commercial sense. And now every single bit of Fleischmann's yeast that you get at the grocery store is a result of what was happening in the mid 1800s. And almost every loaf of bread around the world today is made with commercial yeast that's kept going in a lab. And it's been separated from its natural partner, the bacteria that makes sourdough. Two completely different foods. There's no nutritional requirement for bread in the human diet. There are a lot of cultural, emotional, religious, and other requirements for bread in our diets that we do have to pay attention to. But if we're going to include bread in our diet, a loaf of wild, long fermented sourdough bread is a completely different food, and your body reacts differently to it than a loaf of Wonder Bread that you get at the grocery store.
A whole grain horse bread, and the properly prepared and removing the shell of the wheat chaff. You remember that was done. Why did we do that? Why did we go through all the work of taking the wheat and processing to simplify it? I guess was that accidental or was that purposeful?
Two things. The first one is when we think about how and why bread and grains entered our diets, there's a lot of new exciting research coming out right now that suggests that, first off, the switch from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which was not this incredibly brutish. I mean, when you think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, actually, can I do a sidebar for 30 seconds? It's worth it. I promise.
Your time here, Bill. Please
make sure I get back to the grains. I think this is a very important story. what I 10 years ago this year, the show I did for National Geographic, The Great Human Race, aired. So about 11 and a half years ago, I would teach an experimental archaeology class at the college every semester. And the students would make and use all these ancient technologies, and we'd create this meal throughout the entire semester. So this was my world: stone tools, ancient fire, all these things, right? So it was around the time that Naked and Afraid came out, that television show. And the students wanted me to be on Naked and Afraid really, really, really bad. And I didn't want to be on Naked and Afraid really, really bad. Have you seen the show? You know the show, right? They take naked a man and a woman who supposedly don't know each other, strip them down naked and throw them for like 30-something days in the middle of somewhere they have to survive. So I didn't want to tell the students, I promise this is related. I didn't want to tell the students that I didn't want to do it. So I thought to myself, if I told my wife the students want me to do it, then she would say there's no way in hell, and then I wouldn't have to do it. And I could tell the students it was all my wife's fault. So I sat her down one night. I remember this. She sat her down and I said, hey, listen, I got to talk to you about something. The students want me to do Naked and Afraid really bad. What do you think? And she sat there and she's thinking and she's thinking. And I'm thinking to myself, this is taking way too long. And she finally says, it'd be okay. And I'm like, what do you mean it'd be okay? You know what happens? You've seen the show. She's like, yeah, I did. I have. She said, but you've seen the show too. And in the first day or maybe 2 days, one of them, it's usually the guy, might have a little twinkle in his eye. Like you can tell he's got some amorous thoughts going on, right? But after a couple of days of starving and getting destroyed by mosquitoes and covered in poison ivy and sunburn and diarrhea and all the things, it's the last thing in anybody's mind. She said, it's probably a safer place for you to be than at the college right now. I'm like, oh, I get it. So then I brought I contacted our dean at the college and asked her if she thought it would be okay, because I thought she would say no. And she said it'd be fine. Well, thank God National Geographic called or contacted me the next week, and I did The Great Human Race. I didn't have to worry about it. But there's a really important part of this story. When you think about our ancestors and what they were doing and how they were interacting with their environment and what their food was like, they weren't surviving. Like the people on Naked and Afraid are surviving. You know, they filmed that show for 30-something days. I've talked to the people that worked on that show. They said, you have to film this show for 30-something days because they do nothing. If you need 42 minutes worth of content on a television show with them doing nothing, then you need to film them for 30-something days, 24 hours a day. They don't do anything. They're trying to conserve energy. They're trying to survive. So our ancestors, two things are happening with our ancestors. One is our populations for most of our prehistory were increasing, and our bodies and our brains were getting bigger, right? We weren't surviving. Surviving populations at best just get by, but they typically don't have babies, and those babies typically don't have babies, at least most of the time. Subsisting, right, means you're staying the same. So that means you're doing okay. Your bodies are staying the same. You're doing just good enough to get by. You're having some babies just to keep the population the same. Our ancestors were not subsisting either. Our ancestors were crushing it. They were doing so incredibly good at developing new ways of getting incredible nutrition from the environment and turning it into something that their bodies could do something with, that our populations rose, our bodies got bigger, and our brains got bigger. So with that said, we were doing great as hunter-gatherers. With this, back to your bread question, this switch to agriculture, right? One of the questions, why? Like we take agriculture and this monocropping and grains in our diet for granted. And we do it mostly with machines now. The switch to agriculture 12 to 15,000 years ago meant people were working harder than they ever did for less return. Why the hell would they do that? Especially for a loaf of bread. I don't care how good the bread is. Nobody works that hard for bread. The current thinking is, and a lot of evidence is suggesting, they were doing it for alcohol. People will work that hard for alcohol. The idea that the switch was first for alcohol and bread came after. Beer came first, bread came second. So they were doing it. What's that?
Beer and bread.
Beer and bread. So the idea is this. They're processing these grains in order to do something to them to get, they have no business going into our bodies. Fermenting them is a major part of detoxifying them. But one thing we have to think about too is that we think about grains in our diets, and everybody's okay. If I'm going to eat grains, I'm going to eat whole grains. Well, it's an interesting thing to think about because yes, there's more nutrition in the whole grain, but there's more toxins in the whole grain as well. if your issue is with the grains in your diet is at a toxic level, you actually may do better with a white sourdough bread than a whole grain sourdough bread.
And so why are our brains so attracted to beer and bread? Because ultimately it took a lot of people to do the processing. So yes, we loved it. And so it, I guess in our ancient environment, was there some fermented substance that made alcohol that we learned from nature?
Oh, I'm positive. So the difference with beer, if anybody's ever made alcohol listening to this, all you need to do to make alcohol where you have simple sugars already is expose them, right? Make sure they have the right amount of water and expose them. So a fruit that drops on the ground from a tree and it's completely ripe and it smashes on the ground and it's exposed, immediately starts fermenting. If you go to the grocery store and get a red grape and look at the side of the red grape, and you see that little white dusty powder on the outside, that is wild bacteria yeast it's attracted to the sugars in the grape. They're right there. They're in the air. They're on our skin. They're on the fruits. They're on the ground. And you expose it, it starts fermenting. And our ancestors were naturally drawn to that already, because that fermenting fruit, the fact that it's fermenting is an indicator that it's completely ripe. And unripe fruits have a higher toxin load than a ripe fruit. And there are many, many, many wild fruits that in an unripe state are incredibly dangerous. But when they become ripe, they are much, much, much safer. And those toxins turn off. So there's an idea, it's called the drunken monk hypothesis, that suggests our ancestors, all mammals, are drawn to naturally fermenting fruit because they know that it's safer than they know that it's ripe at that point. It's an indicator. But the difference, and this is where a lot of the work comes in with beer, if you take a grape and smash it, it will ferment. You take raw honey and add a little bit of water and change the hydration, it will naturally ferment into mead. An apple will naturally ferment into cider. This just happens naturally. The difference with grains is that yeast will not work on a complex carbohydrate. You have to convert it into a sugar, a simple carbohydrate, a sugar first, which is done through sprouting and then keeping it at a certain temperature, if anybody's ever made beer. So there's an extra step with turning a grain into alcohol.
So what poisons come from the animals, and what was the danger of hunting and eating animals versus hunting and eating plants?
That's a great segue, because as you know, we've spent the entire time here for 20 minutes talking about all the dangers of plant toxins, or some of the dangers, a ton more of plants. Plants have toxins, all these things, and all these ways our ancestors have developed ways of getting around the toxic part of plants, or dealing with the toxins, detoxifying them. A massive amount of technological input has gone into just making a plant safe enough for us to put it in our mouth. The difference with animals is that they're not. I mean, there's very, very few, like the Greenlandic shark, which is something that they ferment in Iceland still today to make the fermented shark. That the flesh is toxic until it's been fermented. And I don't know, have you ever had it?
Not yet.
Oh, it's actually quite an experience. I highly recommend it. But and there's very, very few things. I think there's like 4 examples in the animal world of something being toxic that you have to deal with when you eat it. Other than that, every bit of an animal is not only a great source of nutrition, but it's incredibly safe. It's bioavailable. It's incredible dense nutrition. So the difference from a technological standpoint from millions of years of processing our food, almost all of the technologies that go into, including plants in our diet, go into performing 2 things. One is accomplishing 2 things. One is detoxifying the plant, and 2 is making the nutrients in that plant available to our bodies. With animals, it's just about getting the animal. A bow, an atlatl, a boomerang, a trap, a fishing net, a fishing hook, whatever it is, to actually overcoming our physical limitations, getting that animal. But once you have that animal, all you need is a sharp edge, and you can access the most incredible, safest, bioavailable nutrition possible, period. You don't even have to cook it. Meat, there is a little bit of evidence. Richard Wrangham, a primatologist from Harvard University, has done a lot of work on this. He has some research that suggests a tiny bit of cooking, a minuscule amount of cooking with red meat makes the nutrients in it a little bit more bioavailable to our bodies, but on a scale that's almost immeasurable, because that raw meat would offer, especially if the raw meat's either physically processed, either sliced or ground up first, incredible nutrition for our bodies with very little work. Organ meats are, I mean, cooking them sometimes makes it even, less bioavailable. So organ meats, blood, fat, brains, eyeballs, testicles, connective tissue. I mean, all of these things, in my mind, are the basis of what started to make us human.
Your preparation for food in your kitchen of your restaurant, which takes the most to prepare for someone's plate? The plant products or the animal products?
Oh, the plant products by far.
Right.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. So we have a very strict set of rules that we go by for any food preparation we do at our home, but also at the restaurant. So, for example, anything that contains flour, gluten-free flour or not, anything that contains flour is put through a wild, long sourdough fermentation process that, from start to finish, sometimes is several days long. Any grain, nut, seed, or legume, the babies of the plant that made them are inherently incredibly dangerous and require massive processing. Any grain, nut, seed, or legume is either soaked, sprouted, fermented, and or nixtamalized before it is even thought about putting into a recipe. So, for example, we do make peanut butter. We make very familiar foods, but implement traditional processes to make it as safe as it can be. So our peanut butter starts with raw peanuts. We soak them overnight, then we dehydrate them, then we roast them, and then we start actually making the peanut butter like somebody else would make them. It is a different jar of peanut butter that you would get from us than anything you could buy at the store. Our granola, again, I'm not suggesting granola is the most nutritious thing in the world, but if you're going to have granola, this is how we make our granola. We take raw oats, rolled oats. We soak them in whey left over from making our yogurt, which is completely alive. It's acidic. We soak the oats, we soak the sunflower seeds and the pumpkin seeds overnight. Then we dehydrate it. Then we start making the granola. I mean, days and days worth of processing it goes into just making something as simple as a granola or a peanut butter. Whereas, the meat is a completely different thing. We do ferment and cure certain meats like salami, for example, or guanciale or pancetta. Those things take some time just because there's some chemical processes happening to preserve it and also some dehydration that we need to happen over time. But other than that, I mean, we're just literally making the meat products, and the vegetables require that process, or plants require that processing.
Our modern world, that someone else's hunting, gathering, and planting and picking and processing our food. I mean, when did we go from being our own hunter-gatherer to someone else's doing all the hunting and gathering? And it is really that part of the problem, because our body, our brain still, if food's available, we want to eat as much as we can. And now there's more time to eat, less time to, we don't have any time to prepare because someone's already done it.
The first part of the step you're referring to, or that going down that path, begins at the agricultural revolution. Prior to that, there are some differences when we look at hunter-gatherer groups, whether they're clans or tribes or what have you. We do see some distinction between different responsibilities and males and females and kids and adults. I mean, there are a little bit of differences certainly in there, but everybody in the group is engaged in the act of accessing the resources and also processing that into a food that goes into our mouth. So at most, there's like one link in the food chain, like somebody in your family or somebody is getting something that's a part of your diet. When we switch from that to agriculturals, that's transformed. Right now, for the first time ever, We have some people in a much larger community. Some people are working really, really hard to feed other people, and there's a lot of people that are in that community that are the way we talk about it in school, right? The way we learned about it was they're freed from the responsibilities of having to get their own food and can go do these other things and can become poets and playwrights and artists and all these other things, which is wonderful. Those are very important things. But the downside of that system is there's a major part of the population that is no longer engaged with getting their food or processing their food or dealing with their food. And that food chain starts to become longer. And we become distanced from that and the knowledge about our food and where it comes from. And this continues to progress over thousands of years. And then finally at about, the Industrial Revolution, I think, is the next major point in our food past, when we have a shift where a whole lot more people become distanced from their food. So we go from hunter-gatherers to, at the beginning of agricultural roots, to food producers, right? We're producing food for the first time in fields or what have you. And then at the Industrial Revolution, many of us become food consumers, right? We have no stake in our food, where it comes from, how it's getting to us. We just go and buy it because we are now engaged in, factory systems and working in a different way. And we can't be bothered by that aspect, that incredibly important part of our lives, how we feed ourselves, how we feed our families, how we feed our kids. That is something that's become somebody else's business. And now we have to have, YouTube lives and podcasts and people talking about how we should eat because we're so distanced from our food, and we're trying to regain that now.
It is so in the hunter-gatherer communities that you have visited in this world, are they mostly animal-centric or plant-centric? And are you seeing a difference in our health outcomes because of a animal-centric versus a plant-centric?
Most of them are animal-centric. But I do have to say this. I have never, and we've been in some incredibly remote areas that took days and days to get to, between planes and vehicles that don't even require roads to move, to hiking to get there. I mean, incredibly remote areas. I've never been around a group that hasn't been impacted somehow by the outside world. Right now, some of the very remote ones are incredibly, not impacted, much whatsoever. When I was in the Altiplano of Bolivia, we were at 16,000 feet. We were in literally the middle of nowhere. It is one of the only group. I was with this small family, beautiful, amazing family. We were doing potato research on how to detoxify potatoes. But the daughter of the family is one of the only people I've ever met in the world that has never had pizza, which is crazy. I will tell you, unfortunately, you think all Doritos and Coke can go everywhere in the world. The thing that I've seen all over the world, unfortunately, almost everywhere, is a Snickers bar. My God, Snickers bars have permeated everything. It's unbelievable. But the reason I say that is, and I'm not joking, I mean, the reason I'm saying that is because they've been impacted. There's a lot of incredible amount of information. We can get stories that we can capture, and food processing methods that are really, really, really relevant today that we implement into our restaurant downstairs. But they have been pushed from incredibly fertile, lands teeming with wild game to really marginal lands in almost every case. I mean, it should be no surprise that almost every major city in this world has a massive amount of archaeological deposits underneath it, because it was a great place to be as a hunter-gatherer. It was a great place to be as an early agriculturalist. It's a great place to have a city and have trades coming up rivers and the boats and all these things. So, as cities expanded, and then the suburbs expanded, and all these things expanded, these people got pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, no matter where you are in the world, to really marginal lands. And whether they're focused on animals or focused on plants or a combination of both, they are doing it at a level that is much more difficult to do than it was when they, thousands of years ago, when they were living in the best place to do those things. But that said, the healthiest people I have ever spent time with in the world are, now I say this, I'm not a medical doctor, and I didn't have, I didn't take any blood from them and, get samples and all this. Just by being able to see them and interact with them, see what they look like, their stature, their muscle tone, their fat on their bodies or lack of it, their, how white their eyes were, how broad their smiles were, just those kind of things. When you just look at somebody and know, oh my God, this is the perfect human form. This is the perfect human, this is the way we were meant to be. Was with the Samburu warriors in Kenya, where we were there because they drink blood and milk every single day, twice a day. That is the mainstay of their diet. And they eat I actually think they eat I don't want to say no, but I never saw a vegetable consumed the entire time that I was with them. Blood and milk is the basis of their diet. They actually don't even eat that much meat because they look at both blood and milk as a renewable resource from the cows or whatever animals, typically it's cows, that they're getting it from. They take a little bit of blood, a little bit of milk. They let the animals replenish that, and they get the next batch from a different cow. When they kill the cow, they have one big meal, and that's it. They're done, right? But when an animal dies, they will absolutely consume it. But they're the healthiest people I've ever met. I mean, we're having these conversations about sourdough bread and how to detoxify cabbage. And at the same time, that's the healthiest humans I've ever seen in my life.
Where have you seen the most unhealthy humans in your life, and what is their diet?
Nobody has ever asked me that question. That's this country, I would say, and I hate to say it that way, but there's a moment that makes me, and it isn't just this country. I mean, there's places in Mexico right now that are, the obesity rate is climbing at a level that is something that is surpassing what's happening in the US, parts of Europe as well, certainly. But when I was writing my book, I was on sabbatical, and the family and I lived in Ireland. And I remember it was this one moment, and it's not the fact that we were in Ireland. It's just we happened to be in Ireland, and friends of ours were coming from the US, and we went to the airport in Dublin to pick them up. And we're standing in the airport, and you're in Dublin, and with Ryanair, you can get anywhere from Ireland for like $59. I mean, it's unbelievable. So there's flights coming in from all over the world, and we're sitting here and we're waiting for our friends to come from the US, and we're in the receiving hall or whatever the heck you call it, and people are coming off of planes, and you don't know what planes are coming off of, right? But we're watching them. And we're just physically looking at the people coming off the plane. And I'm not talking about a mass amount of people from all the world are coming in. Forget skin color, forget dress, any of that, because it's such a mix of people that didn't mean anything. I'm just looking at them coming, and you knew exactly what the entire family said. Oh, the plane from America just landed, because we saw them walking in comparison to the rest of the world. I would say it's the US, and I would like to blame it simply on because of the diets that we're eating, and we're sedentary and all those things. And that's true, but there's a larger underlying problem. And the larger underlying problem is our food chain is this long. We do not, most people eating, whether it's at a restaurant or even if you're cooking it in your home, don't know anybody involved in that entire food chain. They don't know anybody that's any of those links of the food chain. They don't know the person that raised the plants, tended the fields, harvested, processed the food, put it on the truck, drove the truck, unloaded the truck, put it on the shelf. I mean, we don't even talk to the cash register, person at the cash register anymore, because it's all automated. I mean, you can bring food home to your house, and you'd never, ever, ever talked or met face-to-face anybody that was involved in that food whatsoever. And here we are having to talk about that food. So I think the biggest thing, and thank you for what you're doing, is this sort of education is the first step. It's better than just putting somebody on a diet. It's talking about the food and letting people have some insight into that food chain.
Yeah, it's interesting. You go to the airports, and there are just huge lines of carts moving people. Mm-hmm. And so, it's wheelchairs. And you go back 20 years ago, that didn't exist. Right. And then in an airport, there's infinite stops for food on the plane. They're passing out food and sodas and things like that. It's really the mass marketing to the masses who basically our brains are so easily manipulated, and there's a quest for well, let's make more money. And I don't know if you've talked to investment partners to put thousands of your restaurants around the country. Is it our quest to simply massively build whatever we're building, rather than that small farm where you raised your animals, you grew a small amount of food that fed your family and maybe a small community around you?
We've had a lot of people ask us to do either satellite versions of this or put new restaurants in different places, and actually for several years, and we've resisted all of it so far for a number of reasons. I don't know, we're so inspired and excited about the difference that this is making in our community here, and the fact that we can subsist on a commercial level and support. I mean, we have 32 people here every day making food entirely from scratch, and we're supporting them. We can pay them because this model is actually working. So there's something to it. Like, it works. I can promise you it works. We're in the middle of it right now. So it is a model that I'd like to see all over the place. I don't know. And what we're struggling with is, we are embedded in this community right now. We know the farmers. We know where we get our milk from. We know where we get our pigs from. We know where we get our cows from. We know where we get our all of those things. And I think the model is best not that we pick up and spread around the country. It's that we show people how they can do it as well. I think that's a better model.
Teach someone how to fish and hunt rather than deliver the food, and maybe our easy delivery and processing, and people, all of us, we are hanging around the world and listening and learning together. But part of it is how do we get motivated to come to your restaurant like yours, learn from what you're doing and teaching? Because would you say that in general, a meat-centric meal is more powerful than a mush-centric meal?
Oh, 100%. But this is the other part that I think is really, really important. Christina, my wife, and I are 90% carnivore, I would say, with the way that we eat. Sometimes we're 100, sometimes we're a little bit less, but we are damn close. At the same time, what we offer here at the restaurant, and I think this is very, very, very important, because when we opened this restaurant, I wanted, I'm like, okay, we're going to make the restaurant that I would eat at. And if we did, we wouldn't be in business anymore, because a couple people would come and make a pilgrimage. There's probably a few people in this county that would eat there, but not enough that would make it work. What we landed on, and this is, I think, much more powerful on a lot of different levels, and people listening to this can probably relate at some level. We are making, we have a restaurant here that serves familiar food, and we're making it as nourishing as it can possibly be. If you want to come in here and eat carnivore, you have a bunch of different choices. You want to come in here and you're keto, you have a bunch of different choices. There's no fake, whatever sugars, but traditionally made food that would fit on your diet, absolutely. If your kids want to come in here and get a grilled cheese sandwich and a slice of pizza, they can find that too. It's the healthiest grilled cheese sandwich and slice of pizza they've ever had in their entire life. But everybody can come in here and find something to eat. And what you see, I think you probably see this. I see this quite a bit. There is somebody in a family that is 100% down a rabbit hole with what they're doing with their health in a good way. But they're full carnivore, or full keto, or full whatever, and everybody else isn't, and they can't find a place to eat. Right? They can all come in here. So if you're a vegan, you wouldn't find what you want in here. But a vegetarian can, not because we're substituting things with fake meat or whatever. We would never do something like that. But there are vegetable-based foods here that we fermented or gone through the process to make it as healthy as it can be as well. So I think there's something to that too.
And tell us a little bit about what you've seen around the world in socialization and community, a communion around our food, our meals. and maybe how our modern world of snacking all the time and quick meals and you know you don't know the food and you don't know the people serving it.
It's a great point. I just actually we posted a blog post yesterday about the importance of the kitchen table, or the table, right? And you know, one thing I like to say, and we said it in here all the time, is one of the best problems to have is a table that's too small, right? Because so many incredible things happen around that table. If you're doing it right, it's where you get, you know, nourished from a nutritional sense. But as we've talked about before, and one thing that I mention all the time is to be fully nourished as a human, you need to meet or exceed simultaneously your nutritional needs, your cultural needs, your emotional needs, your, some people, political needs, for some people, religious needs, and the list can go on and on and on and on. And to be fully nourished as human, because food is so embedded in everything that we do and everything that we are. And it's one of the most sensual acts that we as humans engage in. All of our senses are firing at the same time. It is a very important part of every time we put food into our mouth. It is a very important part of our experience, literally being on this planet. It's expressing who we are. It's reinforcing all of these things. I mean, it's so incredibly important beyond how much fat and protein is in that bite of food. So this happens around a table. It happens with intention. Around a table is where you have conversations and you laugh and you joke and you argue, and parents teach kids what they should and shouldn't do, and kids push limits, and all of these things happen around a table. And in every traditional place that we've been, every group that we've been, there is a massive amount of effort to make those experiences what they are. And they're different depending on, who you're with and what they're doing. But in some cases, it's like what you would think about maybe in like an Italian grandmother's house. Like, she spent all day getting ready for that dinner. They spent all day getting ready for this 1 or 2 meals of the day. And you're not sitting there, like you said, eating every day and grabbing something and walking out of the house. Those kind of things don't happen. The time around meals are very important. And what's also interesting is this sort of intermittent fasting like thing that's become such a craze is very natural in the rhythm of a lot of hunter-gatherer, even agricultural groups that we've been with. The general trend seems to be something like this. And remember, a lot of these places that we are at have no electricity whatsoever. So your circadian cycle is sort of being reinforced by what they're doing. So get up in the morning, and typically people would just go do what they do. Like maybe get a cup of tea, a cup of water, a cup of coffee, depending on who you are and where we're with. But typically it's get up and go hunt, go farm, go do whatever. Midday, people would come back. And this isn't 100% the same thing, but in general, midday, people would come back in, and whoever was still at the house had been reheating or working on whatever was left over from the night before, the main meal, right? So that's what you would have. Then you would go back out, and right before dark, you'd come back to the house or the shelter or the hut or whatever you're living in. And the people that stayed back, that didn't go hunt or farm or whatever, were spending the entire day making the evening meal. Come back in, you're done for the day. There's no electricity, right? Maybe you have a candle or a fire, but you're sitting there, you're telling stories, you're eating, you're relaxing, you continue to do that, and then finally go to bed and get up the next day. And it's literally in many cases, it is one meal that the entire day people were spending time preparing for, again, not only in the sense of making the food, but preparing for that incredibly important event of people gathering. And then one meal a little bit earlier of whatever food was left over from the night before. That is a very traditional way of eating.
We have a bunch of questions, Dr. Kiltz.
Let me just get to Rick's, but quick question. So how do you prepare blood and milk from an animal to eat? Is that just blood and milk that you collected and you consume it? Or is there a preparation in those communities that's their primary meal?
It is. Oh, in that case, that's a great question. There's a lot of work that goes into actually getting the blood and the milk, right? Actually gathering it. And I'll tell you how we gathered it, but there's not much preparation beyond that, like I just mentioned. But it is consumed typically twice a day. And for a lot of the year, that's all that's consumed at all, the entire day. So when we did it, what we brought a cow over, and they had a big rope and they put it around its neck. Now, this is not a struggle. They literally walk the cow over, right? And this happens every single day, multiple times. Bring a cow over, put a rope around its neck and tie it fairly tight. And it's sort of like when they put a rubber band around your arm to give blood. Right? So the jugular gets super big. Then they have a little bow. It looks like a little toy bow. And hold on, I actually have the arrow. This is the actual arrow that we use. I traded for it. So this is the arrow, and this is the entirety of it. And it's hard to see, but this is the end of it. It's a little piece of metal, and it's wrapped on here. But what's important is where it wraps, where it at about a ½ inch in, you can see it here. There's a lot of wrapping, and that wrapping is there on purpose because they don't want to kill this cow. They just want it to go in, and it stops where it's wrapped real thick. It's like a little bit of a wall. It goes in and pops back out. And when it pops out, it's like a stream of blood like this. So they collect about a quart of this blood. And then after they've collected the blood, they take the rope off the neck and they throw like a little bit of dirt into the wound, and it stops bleeding. It literally walks away. So it walks away, and they go over to another cow and they milk the other cow into another container. So they have these 2 containers about equal parts of raw milk and blood. And they take a stick, and in the blood, they start stirring it because it's coagulating, right? So they stir it, and it coagulates around the stick, and they pull that out, and it looks like a little bloody lollipop. It's kind of disgusting. But they take that and they give that to the dog. And then they go back and forth, and they mix the blood and the milk together like this, and then just drink it. That literally is all the preparation for that. And I will tell you, it is potentially the most satiating thing I've ever consumed in my life. Like you knew you were putting something into your body. And I'm not a huge fan of like drinking my calories for a lot of reasons, because you can overdrink your food so very easily. You just drink it. This isn't something you could overdrink because it had that viscosity. And it wasn't disgusting at all. It tasted, I think Christina, my wife, disagrees a little bit with this, but I thought it tasted like a thick, chocolatey, irony, salty milkshake, which again maybe sounds disgusting to some people, but it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
Awesome. Okay, couple questions.
Rick's question, please.
Yeah.
Oh, where was it?
Rick,
it is.
Do the healthiest people you've seen look like a fitness model, or are they tall and thin? Like me. He's very tall. He's almost 7 feet tall.
The healthiest people that I've ever seen would never win a bodybuilding contest. They were tall and lean, and they had muscle tone, but again, nothing like we would expect from a bodybuilder. So again, the Sombrero people that we were with, and I say this because, and this is what they look like. Again, tall and lean, definitely had muscle tone, very low body fat, and their smiles were just gorgeous. Their teeth, their face, beautiful. Their eyes were so white, especially in parts of Africa where you see malnutrition and sometimes disease. There's a yellowness to eyes and a bloodshot in eyes, and just beautiful big white eyes. And I'll tell you, these aren't necessarily the healthiest people that I've ever seen, although they're incredibly healthy. But I was in the village of Villa Grande in Sardinia, which is the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified. And I would say something very similar about them. Nobody would win a bodybuilding contest or a fitness model contest, but they all were lean and incredibly active and incredibly happy. And I'm talking people well into their hundreds. It reminds me of, I know Brian Sanders does this all the time online, but at Food Lies, they put the pictures of, a typical beach in the 1950s compared to a typical beach scene today, right? It's that kind of difference, right? The people in 1950s, again, aren't going to be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, but they all had muscle tone and they all were lean. That's a good example.
All right, let's do this one. Cooked or non-cooked, and why?
I think maybe that was when I was talking about the blood and the milk. Not cooked.
Yeah, and meat in general, less cooked is probably better. Less cooked or non-cooked is probably better than overly cooked.
Again, listening to Richard Wrangham, yes, right, for a number of reasons. But I will tell you, there are a lot, and I don't know why this is the case. We see this in Australia. We see this in parts of Africa, that we see this in parts of Mongolia, where there's something about the cooking of the meat that is so incredibly important. I mean, it's been enculturated that there's sometimes overcooking of meat. And it's just a few examples. And I don't know why that's the case. And I would suggest it has more to do with preservation or a lack of maybe potentially sanitation, that they're worried about something, or the meat's a little bit older. But fresh meat, again, according to Richard Wrangham, and I wholeheartedly believe in this, if I gave you a hunk of raw red meat and we were able to track how hard your body had to work to get all the nutrients out of that meat, like you're sitting there and you're chewing it and chewing it and chewing it, and then your digestive tract is working, how much energy did it take for you to get a certain amount of nutrition from that? And then compare that to that same hunk of meat, and you either sliced it really thin like carpaccio or ground it like tartare, right? Raw, physically processed like that, requires a lot less energy from us to get the same amount of nutrition. Now, according to Richard Wrangham, what he suggests is, then if you cook it just slightly, I mean, just a little bit, your body has to work even less hard. So I know everybody who wants that big, I mean, I love ribeye too. And I know that's kind of the standard, like, carnivore thing. I love it. And I understand why. But if I gave you a hunk of ribeye, and you said to me, is this the best, easiest way for me to get the most amount of nutrition? I say, no. The best, easiest, and by the way, cheapest way for you to get that amount of nutrition from meat is to have a rare hamburger, because it's been through the grinder and then it's just been touched with the heat. But a ribeye is fantastic.
And if you throw in some organ meats in that ground beef, it's even better.
It's even better. And one thing we do with our organ meats here, because I've seen a big shift, right? People were just eating meat for so long and didn't even want to talk about organ meats. And then you have like certain celebrity personalities that are focusing just on organ meats and eating like 3 pounds of raw bull testicles online, and everybody's loving this, right? And everybody's then eating massive amounts of organ meats. Neither of those things are ancestrally correct. No organ meats is not ancestrally correct, and nothing but organ meats is not correct either. What's the answer? So our answer to this was, and this is based on a lot of, again, work with hunter-gatherer groups. I remember one particular night we were with the Hadza in Tanzania, and they came back from hunting at night, and they had a genet cat draped. They shot it out of a tree, this beautiful big genet cat. And they took it off, and I said, how are we going to prepare this? Are we going to eat it? It's like, no. We always wait to eat the meat with the entire group, but we have to eat the organs now. I said, okay. So we're sitting there, we're eating the organs. And I was wondering after the fact, a cat is a predator, and I don't know how much I'm supposed to be eating the liver of a predator, but we did it anyhow. So we ate the entirety. And I think about it all the time. People ask me, how much liver should I eat? They probably ask you the same thing. Okay, I get liver sounds really good. How much should I eat? How much should I eat? Well, it's a really, that even asking that question is such a symptom of how long our food chain is now. Like, if I ask them, how much liver should you eat? They'd be like, whoa, I don't understand this. Like, I'm going to eat this liver, this heart, these kidneys, and then the meat and the fat, and then I'm going to go hunting again. Like, I don't understand the question. But here we are having to ask how much liver to eat. So that nose to tail approach, the whole animal approach, I think is a very, very good approach. So what we do here is we've calculated the average percentage of liver, heart, kidney, fat, and meat that is in an average beef cow. And that's our ancestral blend, right? So if you eat our hot dog, our hamburger, our meatballs, our chili, whatever it is, it has the same percentage of liver, heart, kidney, meat, and fat that you would find in that animal. And I would, if I could get spleen and other things, I would put that in as well, but we can't easily get those things. And the nice thing is when you do that, I know some of us that have maybe the ancestral blends, you're like, man, that is really livery. Or that blend works and tastes really, really good.
Ollie, let this go longer. Just let this go. Again,
okay. Sure.
Let this go, because again, this is important. But it's interesting. Someone says,
ask him about his book.
Yeah. So like everyone says, well, you shouldn't eat too much polar bear liver, as if any of us are hunting and killing and eating a polar bear liver. I mean, it's like the dumbest thing in the world.
I don't think you should do it, but I don't think I'm ever going to have the chance to even think about it.
I mean, no way. What was your question, Dr. Nelson?
His book, or
The
Eat Like
Tell us
a
a little
Human.
bit about your book.
That book, so Eat Like a Human, was a book that we weren't even think. It was, I wrote that book because everything that I've learned on how to feed my family, I wanted to share that information. I wanted to share not only how to take raw resources from our environment, whether it is grains of wheat or liver, whatever it is, and how to use ancestral and traditional approaches to transform them into the safest, most nourishing foods possible on the planet. And what I did, we wrote this book because, and not only does it has a bunch of recipes in it. It's not a cookbook, but it is, right? It has like 75 recipes in it, but it has all the anthropological and archaeological information that goes into understanding these aspects of the food. What's cool, and I didn't realize it at the time, is just because of a number of circumstances, including COVID, we were launching this restaurant right around the time that the book was releasing. And we didn't know what we were doing. It just kind of happened. So that was the template for everything we did at the restaurant as well. So those recipes in that book not only work at a home level, but we've scaled them and they're working at the commercial level as well. So it's loaded with stories. It's loaded with, a lot of the stuff we talked about today. I opened the book with our experience consuming the blood and the milk with the Samburo, and you get to meet incredible people and family from around the world that we've spent times with and learned from.
And your restaurant is where, and what is it your food fare for humanity?
So the restaurant is located in Chestertown, Maryland. It's on the eastern shore of Maryland, a beautiful little rural pocket right here. The Delmarva Peninsula between the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. It's a cute little historic town. We're only about an hour and 15 minutes from DC, about an hour and a half from Philadelphia, and about 2.5 or so hours from New York City. So we're in this beautiful little pocket, but it's pretty easy to get to us. We are open 7 days a week. And like I mentioned earlier, no matter what your dietary approach is, no matter what your food allergies or preferences are, you can find something to eat here. And I promise you, there's no two ingredients put together outside of our walls. We make everything entirely from scratch using these ancestral principles. We also have a nonprofit called the Modern Stone Age Food Lab. So we continue to do research. We were just in the Amazon this past year doing work with manioc processing. And we do a lot of teaching. So we have in-person classes every weekend that we're here. We also launched an online community called the Ancestral Table, where it's a virtual community where we come together every Monday and do a half-an-hour live cooking class that gets recorded and then put up into a library. You can access it anytime. And then we do live Q&As, and then we communicate during the week. And one other thing I wanted to mention very, very quickly, because I'm super excited about it. I'm developing a food studies program for University College Cork in Ireland. And Cork is like a hotbed of the food scene in Cork is amazing for a lot of different reasons. But this course, it's a virtual, the first course of this program, it's a virtual course. It's on food heritage and how to take ancestral or traditional approaches to food, and then build businesses that can change the community through that. And it's launching this spring, and I can send information if anybody's interested. But University College Cork.
Sprouting seeds, less toxic, more nutrient available?
They're less toxic and more nutrient available, but I see a question here for oxalates. I don't believe, but I don't know this 100%, but I don't believe it impacts the oxalate content of the plant. It'll impact a lot. So for example, the phytates get neutralized through sprouting and turn to phosphorus, and it actually feeds the embryo as it's growing. So there's a lot of amazing things about sprouting. Oxalates are something that I've been diving deep into for the past 10 years, really, really deep, because the focus of much of my research for 20 years has been traditional ways of detoxifying plants. Like it's mind blowing how many ways we can use simple acts like sprouting or soaking or fermenting or a whole host of things to make a plant safer for us to consume. But the one thing I haven't found, although I'll tell you one example I might have just found, I haven't found a way to mitigate the issues of the oxalates in plants. I mean, you can cook with dairy and the calcium binds, and there's some things, but to really make a difference in the world of oxalates, I haven't really found it, except, and we will be doing, I'm researching this right now, and we'll be putting some information about it shortly. But I did just find out about a processing that happens in South America for a tuber called oca. Some of you might have heard of oca. Oca, unfortunately, is one of a terrible but great example of, we find this like traditional food and then take the food without the technology and then put it into Whole Foods everywhere and call it this superfood, and then it becomes a huge issue. The genus of oca is Oxalis, right? So I think it's Oxalis tuberosa or something, right? It is loaded with oxalates, We've taken the food. People are talking about it now in North America. You can find it in some like really high-end grocery stores, but it's loaded with oxalates, way worse than potatoes. I just came across a processing for it that potentially gets rid of all the oxalates. And wow. It's following a practice that they do with potatoes in the same region to make something called chuno blanco. And chuno blanco is made by leaching potatoes in the flowing river for months and months and months and months and months. And then you take it out and you go through a series of steps of processing on the ground up where it freeze dries it. You remove the skin and then you freeze dry it and then it stores. I am looking into that to see if that is a thing. But again, and it's kind of like you and I have talked about before, why? Like, why are you? That's a massive amount of time to spend to eat this little tiny root. But it is interesting. And so to answer your question, I don't know it for sure. I don't think sprouting. It's so funny. Hold on, I gotta show you something. We are actually launching. It's so funny. We're developing a new sourdough pastry that's based on. It's like mushy peas and ham. It's a savory pastry. So sourdough pastry dough with mushy peas, but it's going to be fermented mushy peas with some of the ham that we make. And I'm actually sprouting peas right now, sprouting marrow fat peas that we can use it for a garnish. That's so interesting. I love sprouting.
Nixtamalization, which I hate the word because I can never quite put it together. What is it and why do we do it?
All right. So this might help. The X, it's a Nuatl word. It's an Aztec word. And the X is actually sh, so it's nixtamalization. And I know it's such a hard word to pronounce.
Nixtamalization.
Nixtamalization. Like tamale. The word tamale comes from it for sure. Maize was first domesticated. Probably it's one of the first plants ever domesticated. And I know we talk about stuff in the Fertile Crescent and all that, but may be the first plant ever domesticated at about 15,000 years. The process to take maize, which is one of the most difficult grains in the world for the human body to fully digest, it is a very simple process. You take the maize and you put it in an alkaline medium with a little bit of heat, and it does several things, including making the niacin in the maize available to the human body. So in the state of just the maize itself, unprocessed, niacin is actually called it's in a state that we call niacin or something that's unavailable to the human body. It passes right through our body every time we consume it. But if we put it in an alkaline medium with a little bit of heat, it converts to niacin, a bioavailable form of niacin, and our body can get it. Plus, it changes the proteins, makes the proteins more bioavailable. It does a lot of different things. So all benefit. Plus, it changes the flavor and the texture and the aroma into something that's a little bit more pleasant. So
we're talking about corn.
Yes.
So, okay, good. Just
what was an alkaline? What did they use as an alkaline method in our ancient times?
It was wood ash. So wood ash. It was wood ash and water, and it was soaked in wood ash and water, brought to a simmer for about a half an hour over a fire. Then it was taken off the heat and lets it sit overnight. And then that process just happens over those 12 hours. And all you have to do is rinse it. The outside comes off, all the changes. Now, since then, we now use other things. Some people still use wood ash, Typically, we use cal or calcium hydroxide. So wood ash is potassium hydroxide. Yes. Cal is calcium hydroxide. And then lye is sodium hydroxide. They're all alkaline, and they're all used for this process. So again, wood ash is used sometimes very traditionally still. If you go to any Latin American grocery store, Mexican grocery store, they have little bags of white powder. That's cal or calcium hydroxide. It's actually the same exact thing as pickling lime. If you want to do this in your home, you can go to Walmart and buy pickling lime. It's the same exact thing. Or big companies like Goya would use lye to do the same thing. And that's it. So at the next day, what you have is we've changed corn or maize into what we call it nishtamal. And then we rinse that off. And that's used in things like pozole, for example, real pozole or hominy. Real hominy is processed that way. If you grind it, you turn it into masa, and you can take that masa dough and make everything from tamales to tortillas from that. Grits, all grits up until the Civil War were nishtamalized as well. So all of these things were, up until recent times, where all the corn or maize was processed this way. And then we don't do it any longer. And we had a huge epidemic for a long time in the world when maize was traveling around the world without the processing. People that were consuming it unprocessed properly, massive amounts of it, were getting a disease called pellagra, which is a nutrient deficiency of niacin in the diet. And massive problem. Hundreds of thousands of people around the world died. Millions of people got sick. And in fact, I did a podcast with Ken Berry. His grandfather had pellagra. And it ended up having devastating effects from that as well. It is up until the the 1920s and 1930s, it was a huge issue in the American Southeast until we figured out what that issue was, even as recently as then.
Dr. Nelson.
Have you ever been to Puerto Rico or any Caribbean island and studied the native indigenous Tainos? I'm Puerto Rican, about a fifth Taino.
I haven't. I've been there. In fact, I was in Puerto Rico for a Society for American Archaeology conference many years ago. But unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to learn from anybody there. We were only there for a few days, but I would love to.
One last question, and we'll close it up for the day. Alia, Dr.
Sure.
Nelson.
Which question should we ask? Let's see. How about this one? There is a thing in the news now about freezing sourdough bread to lower the glycemic index. Is that still something you recommend for your long fermented sourdough?
100%. I'm so glad you said this. So there's a lot of benefits of that natural, long, wild fermentation process. Now, number one, you have to make sure it's real sourdough because there's no regulation on sourdough in this country whatsoever. You can call
Is there any real sourdough in the stores?
It's rare, and this is what you need to look for. So the best thing to do is make it yourself. The second best thing to do is get it from a bakery where you can actually talk to the baker and find out what they're doing. But if you go to sourdough, this is the trick. If you go to the grocery store and look for the sourdough, look at the back of it. Doesn't matter what the label says. It doesn't matter if it's in the deli section where the other bread is. It doesn't matter if it's brown paper. It doesn't matter if it's more expensive and it says sourdough. None of that matters. Turn it over. If it says anything sour on it, if it says lactic acid as an ingredient, citric acid as an ingredient, or acetic acid as an ingredient, which is also vinegar. Sometimes it'll say vinegar. I guarantee you it is not sourdough. They are actually making a yeasted bread and making it taste sour because they think the customers are expecting the bread to taste sour. If it says yeast on it, it probably isn't sourdough, although there are some, we don't do it, but there are some sourdough bakers that go through the sourdough process and still add a little bit of commercial yeast just to make sure that they get the lift that they're looking for. It's probably not sourdough. Those are your big light bulb. This is not something that I want to put into my body. Our definition, so a definition of sourdough that most people that know what they're talking about would say is that this bread has been made through a combination of bacterial fermentation and yeast fermentation. The only thing the yeast does in bread making is create the carbon dioxide for it to make it rise. The bacteria are responsible for all the good things. The bacteria is responsible for detoxifying the grains. It's responsible for breaking down the gluten back into its individual amino acids. It's responsible for the flavors. It's responsible for the aroma. It's responsible for all the amazing things other than lifting up the bread. So that would be most people's definition. Our definition goes one step further. When the bacteria are eating the available sugars, it's producing lactic acid. And that lactic acid, so it becomes a little bit more acidic the more fermentation takes place. When that fermentation is such that the pH is below 4.6, then it starts taking the gluten and cutting the protein gluten into its individual amino acids, which is, if you're gluten intolerant, then that's a very good thing for you, right? So we make sure that anything that has flour in it in our restaurant is not only fully sourdough, but it at some point gets to below 4.6 on a pH. We take pH readings and everything before it's baked. So that would be our definition of it. When it goes through that process properly, to answer the question, automatically, without even freezing it, the sourdough process alone, because both the yeast and the bacteria are eating the available sugars, the glycemic index drops from an average of 71 down to 54. So it goes from the high range into the low range. So immediately that's beneficial. The research is showing now that if you take that loaf of sourdough bread after it's baked and put it in the freezer for 3 days, you get the maximum benefits of 3 days. For 3 days, you drop the glycemic index another 40%, which is huge.
Wow.
So it can be in there longer than 3 days, but there doesn't seem to be any additional benefit accumulating after 3 days. So a beautiful thing to do if you're baking your own sourdough is one of two things. One is, if you're baking your own sourdough, you know it's so much effort that you don't want to make one loaf at a time. You make 2 loaves at a time, right? So you make 2 loaves, you have one that you're eating, the other one, you slice it and put it in the freezer, right? So that you can pull slices of it when you need to without defrosting the entire loaf. And you're getting that benefit of that loaf being in the freezer. But a better thing to do, a very, very cool thing to do, is to par bake your bread. So bake it just until the crust starts to turn brown. So the inside's cooked, the crust is set up on the outside, but it isn't like finished yet. So like 10 minutes before the end of the bake, so par baking it, pull it out, let it freeze, let it cool, and then put it in the freezer. And what you do is, when you want that bread, pull that bread out and stick it back directly from the freezer into a hot oven, 400 degrees, whatever, hot oven, and let it sit in there for 10 or 15 minutes. And what happens is the inside thaws and warms, and the crust finishes developing on the outside. And what you have on demand, literally on demand, is it's like a freshly baked loaf of bread on demand, but it went through that process of freezing and that higher and that lower glycemic index.
And serve it with equal amounts of really good salted raw butter.
100% raw fermented butter. And
yes, fermented butter.
There is a word in Danish. I forget the word, and even if I remembered it, I couldn't pronounce it. It translates to tooth butter. Remember this every time that you eat a slice of bread with butter. You should have enough butter on that bread that when you bite into it, it leaves marks of your teeth in the butter. Mm-hmm. That should be the goal.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, if we look at our biggest problem, it's a low-fat diet, a low animal fat diet, and that's killing us. And overtaxing our liver, and liver damage is insulin resistance. That's the most amazing part of it. So, but Bill, thank you for being here today. Spectacular as always. We're going to get down to your restaurant very soon. Spring is I feel it's coming quickly, and you're close for so many of us to be there in so many ways. So,
we'll have an event.
Please, we would love to. We would love to host you. We'll do something super cool.
All right.
Congratulations, CB Carmack.
CB.
Congratulations, CB. Email me, alia@drkiltz.com.
CB coach got his diploma and here got the award. So I think we should get him a Bill Schindler's book. So awesome. Put that on the list. He deserves that.
Perfect.
All right, everyone.
All right.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a great
Bill.
day.
All right, we'll see you
3
soon.
p.m.